Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. I want to jump right in today because we have much to cover and not enough time, as usual, to do it all. I do want to remind you that the book Understanding Capitalism is available at our website, democracyatwork.info, and it is a useful companion to this program. It will elaborate many of the points we have to go over quickly here. All right, let me start with one of the biggest issues of the day: the massive program of firing public federal employees here in the United States, authorized by President Trump and carried out by his good buddy, Elon Musk. I want to talk to you about the economics of firing tens of thousands who may become hundreds of thousands on the way to doing that, and who that may become millions. We don't yet know. It's not too clear that Trump and Musk know either. I want you to understand the economics, whatever else you may think about this. Number one, right now, those tens of thousands of people were earning salaries from the government, being paid, and doing their jobs, whatever it was. Inspecting meat. You know why they do that, because meat is forever being badly produced. Profit dictates shortcuts, and so the meat may be diseased. There's a listeria epidemic killing people in old age homes across America as I speak to you. We need government inspectors to stop that. We have needed them for the last century plus. Okay, we're laying them off, people like that. Public employees. They were paid money and they did a job. Now, let me explain to you the economics. When you fire them, they no longer do their job. They don't come into work. But the government still has to pay them. You know what that's called? Unemployment compensation. Those tens of thousands of people are going to continue to be paid, a little less than what they were getting when they were working. So they get a little less, but you know what they do? Nothing. They go home. So we as a society are paying them a little less than we did before. But before we got whatever work they did. Now we don't get any work they do because they don't do any. Are you aware of this and what it will mean? Or are you only thinking the way Mr. Musk wants you to, that he is making the government more efficient? What a bizarre use of that term. Let me continue. All those people that are laid off, they're not the only ones that suffer. If they don't have their full salary, if they have lost their job and don't know what their future is like, when they discover that the job security they thought they got by working for the government turns out to have been a false promise, you know what? They save money. They don't know what the future is like. They're going to cut back. They're going to make that American move from hamburger to hamburger helper. And that's going to hurt the stores in their community. It's going to hurt their families, their spouse, their children, the elderly they take care of. They're all going to be pinched because they're earning less on unemployment than they got before. Have you thought about that? What those secondary consequences will be? Now, probably not. Let me be the economist again. When you fire tens of thousands of people working for the federal government, they may go on unemployment, but they don't want to live on unemployment because it's significantly less than what they were getting. They want a job. So they're going to go where the jobs are. And where are they? In the private sector. Because you're cutting back the government sector. So they can't go looking for another government job. This would be the worst imaginable time to even try. They're going to go in the private sector. And you know how they're going to get a job? by offering to work under worse conditions or for lower pay or both than the people who now have those private sector jobs. You know what? They're going to do to the people in the private sector what they now fear immigrants will do. So if you're angry at immigrants because they compete with you, why are you not angry at what Trump and Musk are doing to public employees? Because it's going to have the same threatening effect on your private sector job. Wow. Wow. And you know something? As the whole economy shifts down, because that's what this is all about, getting Americans to be used to lower wages, lower standards of living. Whack the public sector. Why? Because that's what politicians can do. They are the employer in the government. They can do it. They can hurt first. They can whack the working class first and then let it spill over and benefit all the other employers. Because that's what this is all about, if you permit it. Now, let me give you an idea of how the government could proceed in an altogether different way, and I'll leave it to you to ask the question, why isn't this alternative that I'm about to bring up, why isn't it being discussed? The government could solve its problems, stop borrowing trillions, find the money to do useful social programs without having to fire anybody. Here's the way. As of 2025, first month, January, there are, get ready, 756 billionaires in the United States. We have a population of over 330 million people, and out of that, 756. You know what percentage of the people that is? 0.000000. I haven't time to give you all the zeros. 756 billionaires. Starting with Elon Musk, who has over 400 billion just on his little own self. If we said to the billionaires, there's a new tax in town, everything a billionaire has over 1 billion will now be taxed by the federal government. You can keep your billion. It's enough to have all the mansions and yachts you want. But above 1 billion, we are taking it for the government. We're going to create what's called a sovereign wealth fund. We're going to take that money away from you, and it's in the hands now of the United States as a country. That's what a sovereign wealth fund is. And it will generate lots of income. We will invest it, we the government. And we'll use the income to provide money to pay for lots of public services. We won't tax people. The tax is over when we've taken from those 756 individuals what they own above $1 billion. They remain rich. They will still be the 576 richest people in America after this tax as they were before. But the government will have a pot of money, so we will not be bothered by the risk of taxations on the mass of people and still be able to do the things we're told now. We don't have to fire hundreds of thousands of public employees. Just think of it. They will be happy to keep their jobs. And the only unhappiness will be that of 756 billionaires who will only have 1 billion instead of what they had before. Why isn't that being discussed? Why don't we have a chance to vote? Put that to a vote, you know very well who's going to win. Give us half a chance, we will win that one. And boy, will this country be better off. I want to turn now to another topic, a big one, with a little bit of time that I have. Europe. What is happening to Europe? They're hysterical these days in Europe, the leaders are. They're hysterical because the United States has declared through Mr. Trump that it is no longer going to relate to Europe as it has, not to the countries individually, not to the European Union, not to NATO, the military alliance, none of it. Here's what the deal was after World War II. Very important for you to understand. In economics, the United States would give to Europe two things. Number one, a military protection. You don't have to have a big army and navy and air force. You can have one if you want. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it won't be a major one, and it's nothing for you to worry about because we're your ally, we're your protector, whether you're worried about Russia or China or North Africa or your own working class, we'll protect you. We will have a nuclear arsenal bigger than any in the world, and NATO will mean that if any of you are troubled, we will be bound by treaty to protect you. Wow. Why was the United States willing to do that? Very expensive, very large, because of the economics. Here were the two things the United States got. Number one, by having the government spend a vast amount of money on a military to protect the continent of Europe, it justified to the American people spending all that money on defense. You remember Dwight Eisenhower told us to beware of the military-industrial complex. Good advice, nobody followed it. The defense is enormous. It's a way of the government stimulating and keeping our economy going by pumping trillions into the defense producers and all of the companies that they in turn buy from. It's a subsidy to our own system, a massive one, justified by anti-communism, the Cold War, and protecting Europe. So it was great for the United States, stimulated its own economy, because the deal was, we'll protect you in Europe, but we are the ones producing the military equipment. That you can't have that in Europe. Very little of it. We do most of it. The second thing the United States got was an ally. After World War II, we entered the Cold War. And communism and socialism were much stronger in Europe than they were here. The first cabinets at the end of World War II, General de Gaulle in France, had communists in it. So we needed the Europeans as allies against communist Russia. Communism in Russia disappeared in 1990. We don't need that anymore. And we don't need to justify military spending by helping Europe anymore either. So Mr. Trump has decided, this is not a good deal. We're not going to protect Europe. We're going to demand much more from you. You pay for it. And also, we want more economic benefits from you. We don't want to be your protector. Partly because we don't think you're threatened by Russia. China's the problem, not Russia. You're not helping us with China. We're not helping you. The deal is off. We're done. We're going to try to separate Russia from China. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to take care of ourselves. Number one, not you. You're left. You're lost. Europe faces an awful moment. At the end of World War II, they bet on the wrong horse in the long run. And now they have to face it. And all bets are off, and we are in for real turmoil in the months and years ahead, especially in American-European relations. We've come to the end of the first half of today's show. Stay with us. I think you'll have a remarkable interview in the second half with a permanent government worker. Before we jump into the second half of today's show, I wanted to thank you for your very generous response to our fundraising efforts this year, and in particular in the last couple of months. And in part responding to that, we are extending the availability of our limited edition linen covered hardcover version of Understanding Capitalism, the book I wrote and that we have been making available now for quite a while. If you are interested, I will be signing copies of that hardcover, and they will be available to you as they have been over the last few weeks. Just simply send an email to us at info@democracyatwork.info and put in the subject line limited edition. We will send you all the information you need to order and receive your copy, signed copy, of Understanding Capitalism in its hardback. And thank you again for your kind attention to the fundraising dimension of what we do. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. I am very pleased, especially at this moment historically, to bring to our cameras and our microphones Colin Smalley. He's president of Local 777 of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. I will be referring to them as the IFPTE, which are, of course, their initials. His union represents workers at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Colin is also active in the Federal Unionists Network. He is a geologist professionally and has been a federal employee for the last 16 years. He lives in Chicago. Let me begin by welcoming you, Colin, and mentioning to our audience that Colin is here as an individual. He's not here representing any organization, neither those I mentioned nor any others. Colin, so first of all, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right. Here's the big question that is on everyone's mind. From your experience, because you are a federal employee, how are federal government workers responding to all of the firings, layoffs, whatever you want to call them, that are part of the DOGE, so-called efficiency project that Mr. Trump has undertaken and given over to Elon Musk to operate?
Yeah, I think when it comes to all of these actions, whether it's firing probationary workers or workers at agencies that Trump and Musk don't like, or whether it is, these harassing emails, the most recent one this weekend that we just received, asking every federal worker to justify the work they did the week before or be fired. And regardless of what kind of attack it is that we're being exposed to, I think that first of all, it's worth noting that this is, while shocking and unprecedented, it is also an escalation of an existing trend. So federal workers have for years been subject to pressure from politicians. We've been used as pawns when it comes to politically driven shutdowns of the government, or these continuing resolutions that make it harder for us to do our job, or the way that certain issues have been used as political footballs, and they really alter the way we do business, and we've been forced to do more with less, fewer employees. Our benefits have eroded, our pay has eroded, and so to some extent I think lots of federal workers are feeling a more intense version of feelings we've been feeling for a long time, of disappointment, of in some ways betrayal, right? Because these are people who have come to their workplace out of a sense of public service. And so in terms of how they're responding, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that federal workers are still coming to work. They're still doing their jobs, they're still serving their communities, and they still have their eye on what's important about keeping our nation running. And, so for me and my workers, it's protecting communities from floods. It's keeping our ports and waterways open for commerce. It's uh, responding to emergencies. And so these are things that still are continuing even as we're being attacked by these oligarchs.
A personal note. I don't want to distract you, but a personal note. I've been a professor all my life, and I know that, yeah, I want to teach. I really do. I like it and all of that. But I was also drawn in part by a notion that there's a certain security that if you get a job as a teacher and you go through a probationary period, as all teachers do, lasting several years, at the end of which there's a procedure to determine whether you're going to stay there or not, that if you pass that procedure and you fulfill the obligations, and I'm sure something comparable is true for engineers working for the Army Corps and so on, uh, there's a
Yeah,
presumption
career
that there's a
tenure.
certain security, and people make life decisions. Can I get married? Can I have children? Can I afford to buy a home? Life changing decisions are made based on a sense of security. And
Correct.
my reaction as an American citizen, and I've worked for the state governments in most cases, but also for the government often, uh, you've just had that ripped away from you, whether you've lost your job yet or not. The security, that part of your life that you counted on, that you were led to count on, has been taken away from you without any
So
kind of procedure whatsoever because a billionaire has decided you're not efficient enough in whatever counts as efficient. I mean, part of me would be blown away by that experience.
yes, and I so it's true that they're trying to take all that away. I Will they succeed? I don't know. I know that as a leader in a unionized workplace, telework is a good example of this. The ability to work from home, sometime, at a certain number of days of the week. That's something that hasn't actually happened to my workforce yet because they have to bargain it with us before they can do it. And so there are things that we can do to forestall that. But the other thing I want to push back on is the idea that they are actually motivated by efficiency in any way. What I think the motivation is here is that the federal government for over 50 years has explicitly, in law, in policy, and in our messaging, held ourselves out to the world and the American economy as a model employer, right? That they've used that phrase, a model employer. And I think anybody who's been around the labor movement knows that when there's a unionized workplace, what take for example the building trades, an electrician shop is unionized. The working conditions that that shop obtains through collective bargaining raises the working standards across the entire industry in that area because other shops that are not unionized have to raise their wages. They have to improve their working conditions in order to retain employees, or else they're going to go over to the union shop, right? In the same way, the federal government provides still, it's not the old style pension, but it's a pension. It still has the expectation that you're going to work 40 hours, and if you work over 40, you're going to get paid either overtime or additional straight wages, depending on a number of factors. But the point is, there are these standards of labor that are upheld by the federal government. And that is what these oligarchs like Elon Musk are trying to destroy. They don't want the American people to remember that there's a better way, that you shouldn't have to work over 40 hours a week to provide for your family, that you shouldn't have to work through your lunches and your rest breaks, that you shouldn't have to work in a factory when a tornado is coming or a hurricane is coming and end up dying as a result of that, as we saw in North Carolina and Indiana within the last year, right? So these are the kinds of abuses that these oligarchs perpetrate on their own employees. And as long as the federal government is around as a model employer, showing that that's not the way it has to be, they see it as a threat. And I think that's what they're trying to erode, not efficiency. I mean, none of this is efficient. Taking somebody that the federal government, the taxpayers have trained, invested the time and experience in many cases, these are employees with advanced degrees, advanced training, experience in the private sector, and we're firing them. and then replacing them with somebody new, there's no way that's efficient, right? I mean, there's plenty of data from the private sector that shows that it's like what, 1.5 times the annual salary is approximately the onboarding cost of onboarding a new employee. And so you're going to do this 200,000 times across the federal government and claim efficiency? There's no way.
You know, I'm provoked by the wisdom that you're giving us to remind everyone. I'm a professional economist. Mr. Elon Musk presides over an immense bureaucracy. When he attacks bureaucracy, he's attacking his own companies. That's a Tesla has a bureaucracy, hierarchy, all kinds of engineers and cleaners and you name it. And those all have to be managed. The notion that the government is inefficient because it has a bureaucracy is ridiculous. All large corporations are bureaucracies. And one of the justifications for giving corporate executives jobs at the top of the government is, get ready, how well they have done, you assume, with the bureaucracy that they supervise. And then yet you want to attack the the illogic here means that there's something else going on. And I think you've just put your finger on it, that this is really an assault on the working class in this country, public and private. It's just going after what they think they can target and hope that the spillover hurts everybody. Which, by the way, again, as an economist, I try to point out, if you're laying off tens of thousands of public employees, where do you think they're going to go? They're going to have to go into the private sector where they're going to compete for jobs, which is going to create for the employer an opportunity to get rid of a higher paid and substitute a lower paid. I mean, this is as old as Methuselah, this game. We shouldn't be surprised and we shouldn't be fooled. Tell me a little bit, what is your union, for example, or government employee unions? I know there are several of those. What are they doing about this?
So I think that there's a number of levels to this. Of course, there's our national level, our organization. So I'm part of the IFPTE and a proud member there. But and they are in coordination with the other federal sector national unions. They're doing things like filing lawsuits, doing things like congressional outreach, and making sure that we are holding to the extent that the rule of law can, given the damage that this administration has already done or did in their first administration to our judicial branch, to the extent that they can, trying to preserve the the actual rule of law itself that the Republican Party, at least claims to care about. And in addition to that, they're providing us resources, whether they're legal or organizing resources, to try to respond to the fact that thousands of federal workers are joining their union right now. I think that workers are seeing which side they're on. And regardless of how they may have voted, regardless of their own beliefs on a number of social issues, I think they're seeing who, like I said, whose side they're on. And so in my own local, we represent about 300 workers. And since the election, we've gone from about 70 dues paying members to 140. And so we've doubled our
Wow.
membership. We're almost to half of our entire shop. The federal government is open shop, the so-called right to work conditions, where we represent everyone, regardless of whether they pay dues and are members or not. And so the fact that over half, or almost half in my case, but I know some of my colleagues have crossed that halfway mark, where more than half of the workforce is opting in and paying dues and saying, we need a voice here. We need to stand strong as a union. And so, in addition to the legislative advocacy and the lawsuits, the other piece is that we have rights for collective bargaining. And so unions all over the country are coordinating on how are we, if there's language that's applicable to any of these things, like the uh, the return, so return to in-person work, or the uh, these meddling, what did you do last week emails. We can file grievances. If our contracts don't have language on them already and it's a change in working conditions, then management's required to bargain with us before they can implement these changes, even if they're coming from the president himself. And so that's what we're doing. And to the extent that the federal government is marching ahead and neglecting their legal obligations, we're filing unfair labor practice complaints, uh, either through our grievance process or through the Federal Labor Relations Authority. So there's a lot that we can do, but mostly we're keeping an eye on each other. We're lifting each other's spirits. We're making sure that people understand that no matter how much fear and hatred and division and hopelessness these oligarchs are trying to sow in our workplaces, we have in our pocket the deepest emotion, which is love. People come to these jobs out of a sense of love for their community and wanting to make their community a better place. And that's going to, at the end of the day, win out over fear and division.
Colin, I wish we had more time. We don't. You've been a very, very eloquent spokesperson for your union and for what's going on. And I couldn't end on a better note. If there's the will, which you have shown us you will have, you will find a way to push back and not let this steamroller go any further than it already has. Thank you. I'll probably be checking with you again in a few months to see how it's going, but I appreciate enormously your time and the kind of spirit you've shared with us today. Have a very
Thank you,
good
Professor.
day, and to my audience, as usual, I look forward to speaking with you again next week.